I was sitting silently with my 8-year-old grandson at my son's second wedding when he unexpectedly gripped my hand and whispered, trembling, "Grandma, I want to leave now. Haven't you looked under the table?" His small fingers pressed into my palm with a force that no child should ever need to use. My heart skipped as I bent forward, pushing aside the long, white linen that brushed against my shoes. There, taped under the edge of the tablecloth, was a folded piece of paper. I pulled it free with shaking hands. In simple black ink, it read, "Extra peanut butter for the child's plate." The words hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened, my breath caught in my throat. Peanut butter, Jordan's one mortal enemy. His allergy wasn't mild, it was catastrophic. One accidental bite could close his airway in minutes. Around me, the wedding hall shimmered with golden light. Jazz music flowed from the bandstand. Glasses clinked and laughter rolled like waves against the high ceilings of the ballroom. Waiters carried silver trays of champagne. A photographer snapped photos of the bride in her satin gown. Everyone was celebrating, oblivious to the storm that had just erupted inside me. I gripped the note tighter, my knuckles pale against the paper. My mind spun. Was this a mistake? A cruel joke? Or was it something far darker, an intentional plan to harm an 8-year-old boy? My boy. My name is Grace Hollister. I am 67 years old, a retired librarian from Atlanta, Georgia. I have lived most of my life quietly among shelves of books, believing in order and logic, in the idea that words carry weight and truth. I never imagined that one day words on a tiny folded note could mean the difference between life and death for my grandson. Beneath the table, I saw Jordan's fire truck slip from his trembling hands and hit the marble floor with a hollow clang. Every guest turned at the sound. That little toy spoke louder than my words. It was Monica's presence, reminding us all what was at stake. He never went anywhere without it. That fire truck had scratches on its paint and one missing wheel, yet it was his anchor. He looked up at me with wide, fearful eyes. "What does it say, Grandma?" he whispered. I forced a smile that I didn't feel. "Nothing you need to worry about right now, sweetheart." But inside terror clawed at me. The band shifted to a livelier tune. The bride and groom, my son Derek and his new wife Vanessa, twirled in the center of the floor. Guests cheered, snapping photos on their phones. Vanessa's radiant smile gleamed under the chandelier light. She was everything the world adored, young, glamorous, seemingly perfect. But Jordan's body tensed whenever she came near. He never spoke of it directly, but I saw the way he shrank back, the way his laughter dimmed when she entered the room. Now, holding this note, I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Was this simply an oversight from the catering staff, or was it connected to the unease I had felt ever since Derek brought Vanessa into our lives? I had lived long enough to know that evil rarely announces itself with loud footsteps. More often, it comes disguised as charm, as a smile too flawless, as a gesture that looks generous, until you peel away the surface. The chatter in the ballroom grew louder, but in my ears it was muffled, as though I were trapped underwater. Every detail sharpened the shimmer of wine in crystal glasses, the polished shoes of a groomsman, tapping to the beat, the nervous laugh of someone at the next table. Life went on while a quiet war began inside me. I looked again at the note. Extra peanut butter. Not just peanut butter, extra. That word lodged in my chest like a shard of glass. Whoever wrote it wanted to make sure Jordan's serving was more than enough to kill. I glanced at the waiters moving through the crowd. Trays of hors d'oeuvres passed dangerously close. Could one of them be carrying Jordan's death sentence? My hand shook as I reached for my purse where his EpiPen rested, always close, always ready. Jordan tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma, please. Can we go home?" His voice was thin, pleading. I leaned down and kissed the crown of his head. "Not yet, darling. We have to be careful. Very, very careful." Inside me, a question screamed louder than the music. Was I imagining things, letting grief and suspicion twist my judgment? Or had I just stumbled onto something unspeakable? something that could shatter our family and leave scars no one could hide. The ballroom roared with applause as Derek kissed Vanessa on the dance floor. Cameras flashed. They looked like a picture of happiness. Yet beneath our table, I held a note that threatened to unravel everything. And in that moment, I realized I had a choice. I could stay silent, pretend this was nothing, keep the peace for the sake of my son's wedding day. Or I could act, risk humiliation, risk being called paranoid risk, tearing apart this celebration because the life of a child mattered more than appearances. I folded the note tightly, slipping it into my purse beside the EpiPen. My heart pounded in my ears as if warning me this was no ordinary day. This was the day when truth hid under a wedding table, waiting to be uncovered. The laughter around me rang hollow. Every smile, every toast felt like a mask, and I knew with a clarity that chilled me to the bone that this night would not end with just a wedding. It would end with a reckoning. My name is Grace Hollister. I am 67 years old, a retired librarian from Atlanta, Georgia. People often describe me as quiet, maybe even reserved, but those who know me best understand that silence does not mean weakness. I built my life among shelves of books, breathing in the smell of paper and ink, guiding generations of children through stories that shaped their imaginations. The world of a library is calm, orderly, and safe. But my own family life has rarely been any of those things. Before everything collapsed, there was Monica. She was my first daughter-in-law, Derek's wife, and the mother of my grandson, Jordan. She was the kind of woman who carried gentleness in her very presence. Her voice was soft, her laughter never forced. She had a way of turning ordinary moments into rituals of love. When Jordan was a baby, she used to hum old gospel tunes while spooning applesauce into his tiny mouth. When he grew older, she walked him to school every morning, checking his backpack twice to make sure nothing unsafe slipped inside. Jordan's peanut allergy had been diagnosed when he was just 3. It was not the kind of allergy that meant a rash or a mild stomachache. No, it was the kind that could close his throat within minutes. Monica knew that reality better than anyone. She read every label, avoided restaurants that cooked with peanut oil, and carried 2 EpiPens everywhere she went, one in her purse and one tucked in Jordan's backpack. She was vigilant, never careless. Her love was protective in a way that made me believe Jordan would always be safe as long as she was around. One of my clearest memories is of Jordan's 5th birthday. Monica baked a cake from scratch, triple-checking every ingredient, wiping the counters twice to avoid contamination. She decorated the cake with small toy cars, each one placed carefully on top of the icing. Among them was a bright red fire truck. When Jordan blew out the candles, he reached for that fire truck before he touched a slice of cake. From that day forward, the toy became his most precious belonging. He carried it to bed, to school, even to the grocery store. Its paint chipped, one wheel bent, but it became his talisman. For me, it became a motif, a symbol of Monica's love lingering after she was gone. Gone. The word still hurts. Monica's death was sudden, a car accident on a rain-slick road. I can still see the funeral as though it happened yesterday. The sky was gray, heavy with drizzle. Derek stood stiff beside the casket, his face a mask that betrayed nothing. Jordan, only 5, clutched the red fire truck to his chest and whispered the words that nearly broke me. "Where is Mommy?" I crouched down, rain soaking my dress, and pulled him into my arms. "She's in heaven, darling," I said, though my own faith was shaky. His small body shook as he asked again, "But who will keep me safe from peanuts now?" That moment carved itself into my soul. I placed my hand on the fire truck and made a silent vow if Monica could no longer guard him, I would. I would be the barrier between Jordan and the world's cruelties. In the months after the funeral, our home felt like a house filled with ghosts. Jordan sometimes woke at night screaming, calling for Monica. Derek buried himself in work, staying later at the office, avoiding the empty spaces Monica once filled. And me, I tried to stitch us together with routines, bedtime stories, home-cooked meals, Saturday walks in the park. But grief has sharp edges. It cuts in places you do not expect. Then came Vanessa. She entered our lives less than 2 years after Monica's passing. She was young, glamorous, polished in every way. At first I wanted to believe Derek deserved happiness. I wanted to welcome her with the kindness Monica once showed me. Yet something about Vanessa unsettled me. Her smile stretched a little too perfectly. Her compliments carried an edge of calculation. When she leaned down to pat Jordan's shoulder, his body stiffened. When she offered him a cookie, his eyes darted to me in panic. I noticed the details others ignored. The way she sighed when Jordan interrupted a conversation. The way her voice tightened when Derek praised Monica's memory. She seemed to live in the shadow of a woman who was no longer alive, and the resentment flickered in her eyes like a candle in the wind. Still, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. After all, who was I to judge? I was just an aging librarian, while she was young, full of ambition, promising to help Derek rebuild his life. But Jordan's unease never left my mind. A child does not fake that kind of fear. His fire truck became more than a toy. It became a shield he held between himself and her. One evening, shortly before the wedding, I found him sitting on the porch steps with the truck in his lap. His small fingers traced its worn edges. "Grandma," he said quietly, "please don't let her touch my lunch." I asked him why, but he only shook his head. His eyes filled with a kind of knowing far beyond his years. That night, as I tucked him into bed, the fire truck clutched against his chest. I felt the weight of my vow pressing down on me. My promise to Monica was not just words whispered at a grave. It was living, breathing binding. And as Derek prepared to marry Vanessa, I feared my promise was about to be tested in ways I could barely imagine. The wedding invitations arrived in cream envelopes, sealed with gold. The world celebrated Derek's new chapter, but in my heart, unease settled deeper with every passing day. Something was coming. I could feel it. And while the guests prepared their toasts and the bride chose her flowers, I prepared for something else entirely, the possibility that beneath the glitter of a second-chance danger waited for a little boy with a red fire truck and a grandmother who had sworn never to fail him. From the outside, Vanessa was everything people praised. She was young, strikingly beautiful, and carried herself with the kind of polish that drew admiration wherever she went. At social gatherings, she glowed. Her laughter rang like silver bells, her posture flawless, her hair always gleaming as though freshly styled. Strangers and acquaintances alike whispered about how lucky Derek was, how admirable that he had found love again after tragedy. But behind closed doors, away from the admiring eyes of neighbors and coworkers, her beauty often hardened into something sharp. At home, her eyes carried a chill that sliced through the warmth of the room. Her words, delivered with lips curved into a perfect smile, carried barbs that pricked when no one else was listening. I learned quickly that appearances could deceive. One evening, I watched her glance at Jordan as he reached for his toy fire truck on the carpet. She smiled broadly when Derek looked her way, but as soon as his back was turned, her eyes narrowed with impatience, and a faint sigh escaped. To anyone else, it was nothing. To me, it was everything. The first time I noticed something concrete was during the school registration process. Each fall, parents filled out forms listing allergies and emergency contacts. For Jordan, the peanut allergy box was always bold, always underlined, always highlighted. This wasn't optional, it was survival. Yet when I checked the paperwork Vanessa had submitted, the box was empty, blank. She had signed her name at the bottom a flourish that looked deliberate. I brought it up gently. "Vanessa, I noticed you didn't fill in Jordan's allergy information. That's critical. The school must know." Her response was smooth, her smile quick. "Oh, Grace, it must have slipped my mind. Don't worry, I'll update it." But she didn't. Days passed and nothing changed until I went down to the office myself, clutching Jordan's medical records. The secretary looked at me with raised eyebrows, muttering, "Good thing you came in. We had no idea." That was the first time I felt my unease take root as fear. The second came soon after. Vanessa offered Jordan a cookie one Saturday afternoon. It looked innocent enough, a golden brown treat still warm from the oven. Jordan reached for it with the trust of a child, but I caught a faint scent the moment it passed near me. I froze. Peanut. Not overwhelming, but distinct the smell of crushed peanuts baked into dough. "Vanessa," I asked sharply, "what's in this cookie?" Her smile didn't waver. "Just a regular chocolate chip." "Don't be so suspicious." I took the cookie from Jordan's hand, breaking it open. Tiny specks clung to the dough. Peanut fragments. My heart lurched. I dropped it in the trash. Mom Derek's voice cut across the room, firm, defensive, almost rehearsed. "You're exaggerating. She's trying her best." I stared at him. My son. The boy I had raised to see truth, now blind to what stood in front of him. His words stung more than Vanessa's denial, but Jordan's eyes told another story. He had seen me intervene. He had felt my grip tighten on his hand. Later, as I tucked him into bed, he whispered, "Grandma, please don't let her pack my food." That plea hung in the air like a sacred vow renewed. The world outside continued to sing Vanessa's praises. At a school event, teachers gushed about her chic outfits her way with conversation. But one teacher, lowering her voice so others couldn't hear, leaned close to me and whispered, "He's always calmer when you bring his food, Mrs. Hollister." Those words struck me as both comfort and warning. Comfort because someone else saw what I saw. Warning because it meant Jordan's unease was visible to others too. Children cannot fake the kind of relief that floods their face when safety walks into the room. I began to notice the pattern more clearly. Vanessa was impeccable in public, but in private, she let small slippages reveal themselves. A forgotten note here, a neglected form there, a casual offering of food that could kill. To others, these might look like mistakes. To me, they looked like a pattern. Still, Derek's defense of her grew sharper. "Mom, you're reading into things. Vanessa loves Jordan. She's just adjusting." His words were steady, but I saw the flicker in his eyes, the small shadow of doubt he refused to admit. Inside, I battled my own doubts too. Was I clinging too tightly to Monica's memory, projecting my grief onto this new woman? Was I being unfair, unable to let go of the past? Or was I the only one willing to see what others chose to ignore? That night, I sat by the window while Jordan slept upstairs, the red fire truck parked neatly on his nightstand. I turned the questions over in my mind. The city outside hummed with traffic life, carrying on as if none of this mattered. Yet in my home, it mattered more than anything. Because when a child looks you in the eyes, voice trembling and begs, "Please don't let her pack my food," you cannot dismiss it. You cannot call it exaggeration. You cannot soothe yourself with the lies of appearances. You must listen. And I did. I listened with every fiber of my being, even when my own son did not. What Vanessa didn't understand was that I had lived long enough to know masks eventually slip. A smile that's too perfect cannot last forever. The cracks were showing, and though she tried to hide them with charm, I saw through. I promised Monica once that I would protect Jordan. In moments like these, that promise became more than memory. It became my compass. And with every slip Vanessa made, I felt the compass needle swing, pointing toward a truth darker than I wanted to admit. The question was not if the truth would come out, but when and at what cost. It was a Wednesday morning, still dark outside, when Derek left for work. He kissed Jordan on the forehead, grabbed his briefcase, and hurried out the door. Vanessa, in her satin robe, stretched like a cat and announced, "Don't worry, Grace. I'll handle his lunch today." Her words made my stomach knot. For years, I had been the one to prepare Jordan's meals. Every apple sliced thin, every sandwich made with care, every wrapper double-checked for peanut contamination. Vanessa's offer sounded innocent, but to me it carried the weight of all the little incidents that had piled up, missed allergy forms, the suspicious cookie, the moments when Jordan's body stiffened at her touch. Still, I said nothing. My instinct screamed at me to intervene, yet another voice whispered that I had to know. If my suspicions were only grief twisting my thoughts, then confronting Derek would destroy the fragile peace we had. But if I was right, then silence could be fatal. I watched her in the kitchen. She moved with a practiced grace, pulling bread jars and fruit from the counter. She hummed a tune, her back straight, her hair shining under the morning light. To anyone else, she looked like a picture of domestic harmony. To me, it was theater. Jordan shuffled into the room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Good morning, Grandma," he whispered, clutching his red fire truck. I pulled him close, kissed the crown of his head, and whispered back, "Eat slowly today, my love." My voice trembled, though I tried to keep it calm. Vanessa handed him a lunchbox, blue plastic, shiny and new. "Here you go, champ. I made you something special," she said, her smile flawless. I wanted to snatch it from her hands. Instead, I forced myself to step back. I had to see. I had to know. Later that morning, I walked Jordan into school as always. The halls smelled of pencil shavings and floor-polished children's laughter bouncing off the lockers. I kissed his cheek before class, smoothing his collar, hiding the storm brewing inside me. By noon, I was at the library shelving returned books when my phone buzzed. It was Mrs. Cole, a colleague and old friend who often supervised Jordan during lunch. Her voice was urgent, shaky. "Grace, you need to come now, right now." I hurried across town, heart pounding. When I arrived at the school cafeteria, Mrs. Cole pulled me aside. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. She held up Jordan's open lunchbox. Inside sat a sandwich, cut neatly into halves, slathered thick with peanut butter. My vision blurred. The room seemed to tilt. Mrs. Cole whispered, "Grace, take him to the hospital now or he will die. If he eats this..." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. I looked over her shoulder. Jordan was at the table, his fire truck by his side, poking at the crust of an untouched sandwich with a finger. He hadn't eaten. Not a bite. My knees nearly buckled with relief. I walked quickly to him, kneeling so our eyes were level. "Did you eat anything, sweetheart?" He shook his head. "No, Grandma. It smells funny." His voice was so small, yet filled with wisdom no child should have to carry. I pulled the lunchbox toward me, closed it firmly and held it against my chest like evidence in a trial. Because that's what it was, evidence. Proof that my instincts were not just grief or paranoia. Proof that Vanessa's smile hid something darker. But with proof came a burden heavier than I had ever known. That afternoon, I sat in my car outside the school, the lunchbox on the passenger seat like a ticking bomb. My hands gripped the steering wheel, white-knuckled. Every direction I looked there was no easy path. If I showed Derek the lunchbox, if I told him what Vanessa had done, it would shatter his marriage. It would humiliate him in front of colleagues, friends, the entire community that praised his new happiness. People would whisper that his mother sabotaged his wife, that grief had made me cruel. He might even turn against me completely. But if I stayed silent, if I smoothed things over for the sake of appearances, I would be gambling with Jordan's life. One mistake, one bite, one moment of trust, and he could be gone. It was a moral dilemma so sharp it cut me open from the inside. Protect my son's illusion of happiness or protect my grandson's right to live. That night, Derek came home late. Vanessa greeted him with a glass of wine and a kiss on the cheek. She glanced at me over his shoulder, eyes flicking for just a second to the corner where I had placed the closed lunchbox. Her smile didn't falter, but her gaze betrayed recognition. She knew what she had done. "Jordan, did you like your lunch?" she asked sweetly. Jordan froze. His eyes darted to me wide with fear. I stepped in. "He ate just fine." I said, my tone calm but edged with steel. I would not expose him in that moment. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing his terror. Instead, I carried the evidence upstairs, placing the lunchbox on my nightstand, locking my bedroom door. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of that plastic box pressing down on my chest as if it contained not a sandwich, but my grandson's fragile heartbeat. Sleep never came. I thought of Monica, her careful hands, her constant vigilance. I remembered her voice on the night Jordan had a fever so high we feared the worst. "Grace, I don't know what I'd do without you." Those words echoed now years later, reminding me of the vow I had made at her grave. By dawn, I knew one thing for certain. Silence would not protect us. But truth, though painful, though divisive, might. The lunchbox sat on my dresser like a sentinel waiting, and with it, a choice I could no longer postpone. I sat at table 8, tucked near the emergency exit, my hands folded neatly in my lap. To the crowd, I was just another gray-haired grandmother in a navy dress. But in my chest, the question thundered, do I expose the truth now in front of 300 people, or do I wait until the music fades, until the guests scatter, until the night has grown cold? Jordan sat beside me. His small shoulders hunched, his toy truck pressed tight against his chest. He had carried that battered truck everywhere since his 3rd birthday. The paint was chipped, one wheel bent, but it was his talisman. Now, in this glittering ballroom, that little truck seemed to hold more strength than all the polished speeches echoing around us. His wide eyes never left mine. He knew I was about to stand. He knew I was about to do something no one else in the room had the courage or the will to do. And the truth was, I didn't know if they would call me a hero or a monster. Across the hall, Derek, my son, the groom, raised a glass of champagne, his arm draped around Vanessa. The spotlight caught them perfect in their designer attire, the flawless couple in the flawless moment. A photographer crouched low, snapping pictures. Guests whistled and clapped. Yet behind their smiles, behind the golden glow, I saw the carelessness that nearly poisoned my grandson. I saw negligence dressed in satin. I saw betrayal wrapped in roses. Society tells us not to interrupt happiness. Let the couple have their day. Keep the peace. But what is peace when a child's life has already been gambled? What is celebration when danger lurks under the buffet table? I looked down at Jordan. His knuckles were white as he clutched his truck, his eyes pleading. And I knew. Silence was no longer an option. I pushed back my chair. The sound of its legs scraping the marble was small, almost delicate. But to me, it rang like a drumbeat of war. My knees shook as I rose, but not from weakness, from the weight of what I was about to carry into the open air. Grandma Jordan whispered, his voice trembling. I bent, brushing his cheek. "Stay here, baby. Hold tight. As long as I stand, you are safe." He nodded, once his tiny body stiff with fear, but his hands hugged the toy truck tighter, as if the plastic wheels could anchor him. His eyes locked on me, gave me strength I did not know I still had at 70 years old. I stepped into the aisle. The chandeliers shimmered, the air charged. My shoes clicked against the marble, sharp and steady. I was close enough to the emergency exit that I could have slipped out unnoticed, but instead I turned toward the head table. I lifted my voice. "Excuse me." The microphone in Derek's hand froze mid-toast. The laughter fell into a confused hush. Dozens of eyes shifted toward me, brows raised, whispers forming in the gaps. Mother Derek's smile faltered. "What are you?" I lifted a hand, my voice steady. "I will not sit silent. This wedding has served poison." Gasps rippled across the room. Glasses clinked down onto tablecloths. A woman covered her mouth with her hand. The DJ's hand hovered over the playlist. For a breathless moment, the ballroom was suspended between disbelief and panic. Derek laughed nervously. "Mother, please, this is not the time." Not the time. My voice cracked like a whip. "Tell me, Derek, when is the right time to announce that the buffet you and your bride approved is drenched in peanut sauce, knowing your own son could die from a single bite?" A silence heavier than stone fell. Eyes turned toward Jordan, who sat at table 8, clutching his toy truck, his small frame trembling. Murmurs swept across the tables like wind through dry grass. Guests craned their necks, glancing at the platters of skewers, the bowls of sauce, the careless remnants smeared across plates. Vanessa stood, her face paling. "Grace, that's absurd. It was just part of the menu no one intended." "No one intended," I cut her off. "Intentions do not erase consequences. Negligence does not excuse danger. My grandson is 8 years old. He has a documented allergy known to every teacher, every doctor, every family member in this room. Yet tonight, in a ballroom full of witnesses, his life was put at risk. The whispers grew louder, the divide forming instantly. Some shook their heads, muttering, "She's ruining the wedding." Others leaned forward, voices sharp with outrage. "She's right. How could they allow this?" And there it was, the fracture in the room. Half saw me as a savior, half saw me as a saboteur. I felt my pulse hammer in my ears. My son's face burned with anger, his jaw clenched. Vanessa's hands fluttered helplessly. The photographer lowered his camera, unsure if this was a shot worth capturing. But I did not waver. I thought of every case, every safety talk I hosted at the library as a retired librarian, every time a voice had been silenced because it was inconvenient, every time truth had been shoved into the shadows so appearances could remain polished. Tonight, I would not let history repeat itself. "This is not about me," I said, my voice echoing. "This is about a child who deserves to leave this wedding alive." For a moment, silence stretched brittle as glass. Then someone at the back of the room stood and applauded. A single clap, sharp, steady. Then another joined, then another. But not all. Some hissed. Some muttered that I was bitter, jealous, vengeful. The divide cut clean across the ballroom. Guests split between those who valued appearances and those who understood life mattered more than photographs. I looked back at table 8. Jordan sat small and silent, but his toy truck gleamed under the light, his hands holding it like a lifeline. His eyes were on me, wide but steady, and in them I saw not fear, but trust. Trust that I would stand even if the world turned against me. That trust was my armor. I drew a deep breath. I will not apologize for protecting my grandson, and I will not sit while danger masquerades as celebration. The DJ clicked the music off. The chandeliers buzzed faintly. The crowd, fractured but attentive, waited for the next move. I stood tall, my spine unbending. In that moment, I was not just Grace Hollister, mother of the groom. I was the witness, the protector. The Voice Society tries to hush when it grows inconvenient. And though the ballroom shimmered with gold, the truth beneath it was darker, sharper, undeniable. The conspiracy was no longer under the table. I had dragged it into the light. I held the crumpled slip of paper high above my head, my hand trembling but steady enough for the words to be seen. My voice cut through the music, sharp and unyielding. Who wrote this? For a heartbeat, the ballroom continued to hum the clinking of glasses, the soft shuffle of shoes. Then, as if someone had pulled a cord, everything stopped. The band faltered mid-note. The laughter stuttered into silence. The chandelier still sparkled, but the room itself fell into a deathly stillness. All eyes turned toward me. I could feel the weight of 100 gazes pressing down, curious, suspicious, incredulous. I had interrupted the perfect picture, and no one knew yet what storm I was about to unleash. Vanessa's heels clicked as she stepped forward, her gown sweeping the floor, her smile too poised to be natural. She tilted her head, the pearls at her neck catching the light. Then with a laugh as brittle as glass, she said, "It's just a silly note." Her words dripped with condescension, as if I were a foolish old woman, fragile and confused. She reached out to take the paper from me, but I pulled it back, holding it closer to my chest. I could have stopped there. I could have sat down, let them all believe I was paranoid, allowed the night to proceed as though nothing had happened. But then I saw Jordan's small face peeking from beneath the tablecloth, his eyes wide with fear. And I remembered the lunchbox, the peanut butter sandwich that had nearly ended his life days earlier. So I spoke. "Do you think this is the first time my voice carried stronger than I expected?" Last week, Jordan's lunchbox contained a peanut butter sandwich. If not for Mrs. Cole at school, my grandson would not be alive today. Gasps rippled across the room. Conversation sparked in urgent whispers. The facade of celebration cracked, replaced by unease. But then came a voice from the crowd, loud enough to cut through the tension, sharp enough to split the room. Maybe she's exaggerating, a man muttered, though his words were clear to all. Who would kill a child at their own wedding? Someone at the back lifted a phone, live streaming the chaos. This is insane. She's accusing the bride at her own wedding. Within seconds, guests were whispering, not just to each other, but to the thousands watching online. Doubt spread like wildfire, turning the ballroom into a digital battlefield. A wave of murmurs followed. Some nodded, uncertain. Others frowned, disapproving. The question hung in the air like smoke poisoning the atmosphere. Doubt was the enemy I feared most. It could turn truth into rumor, evidence into illusion. Vanessa seized on it instantly. Her smile widened, her eyes glittering with triumph. Exactly, she said, gesturing toward me. This is what happens when grief turns to obsession. She sees threats in every shadow. She wants to ruin this day for us all. My heart clenched, but I forced myself to meet the eyes of the guests. I saw hesitation in their faces, discomfort. Some were already whispering, already deciding whether to side with the beautiful bride or the trembling grandmother. I raised the paper again. This is not imagination. This is intent, written, deliberate, undeniable. My voice cracked, but I pressed on. Do you think I want to stand here and say these words? Do you think I enjoy tearing my son's life apart in front of all of you? The silence deepened, heavy and suffocating. Even the waiters froze, holding trays mid-air. Vanessa moved closer to Derek, her hand slipping into his. "Derek, please," she pleaded, her voice dripping with practiced vulnerability. "Tell them your mother is overreacting. Tell them this is nonsense." And there he stood, my son caught in the crossfire of loyalty and truth. His face was pale, his shoulders rigid. His eyes darted between me and his bride, between the woman who raised him and the woman he had chosen. For a long moment he said nothing. That silence was louder than any shout. The crowd began to fracture. On one side, whispers of support for me. What if she's right? That boy could have died. On the other, murmurs defending Vanessa. She wouldn't... Not on her wedding day. This is madness. The room was no longer a celebration. It was a court, a trial without a judge where the verdict would be decided by perception alone. I felt my knees weaken, but I would not sit, not while Jordan's life hung in the balance. I locked eyes with Derek, willing him to see the truth, to remember the boy hiding beneath the table, clutching his toy truck as if it were a shield. Still, he stood frozen silent, torn in half. And in that unbearable pause between his silence and my resolve, the ballroom became a battlefield. Vanessa's eyes flashed as the silence thickened. She took a step toward me, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Her voice rose, trembling, not with fear, but with fury. "She's old." She spat, her manicured hand gesturing toward me as if I were a relic. "She misremembers." This is what grief does. It poisons the mind. My mother-in-law is confused. You all know it. Her words cut deep, not because I believed them, but because I saw heads in the crowd nod ever so slightly. Doubt spreads quickly when it wears the face of beauty. I tightened my grip on the paper. My chest ached, but I stood tall. "I know what I saw," I said, "and I know what I held in my hands. A lunchbox, a sandwich, peanut butter, where it never should have been." Vanessa's laugh sliced through the tension. "This is pathetic. I would never put that child at risk. He is my stepson now. Why would I sabotage my own wedding day?" The murmurs grew louder, a storm of whispers circling the room. I saw Derek's jaw tighten. He hadn't spoken a word since I raised the paper, and his silence was louder than Vanessa's denial. Then out of nowhere, another voice cracked through the noise. Earlier that evening, I had noticed Gloria's hands trembling when she passed a plate of hors d'oeuvres. She wouldn't meet my eyes, dropping a napkin that bore a faint smear of peanut butter. I dismissed it at the time, but now, as she rose pale and shaking it, all made terrible sense. "I can't." It was a whisper, at first broken and raw. "I can't stay quiet anymore." The crowd parted slightly as Gloria Vanessa's 19-year-old cousin rose from a table near the back. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. She clutched the edge of the tablecloth like it was the only thing keeping her standing. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She told me to do it. Her voice trembled, but it carried. Vanessa told me to add peanut butter. She said Jordan needed to toughen up. She said it would be harmless, that it might just make him stronger. I didn't know it could kill him. The words detonated like a bomb. Gasps erupted sharp and collective. The entire hall recoiled as if struck by lightning. Forks clattered against plates. Glasses wobbled on tabletops. The silence that followed was not empty. It was thick, charged, suffocating. Vanessa's face drained of color before flushing red. "Gloria," she hissed, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. "You don't know what you're saying. Stop it right now." But Gloria shook her head, sobbing openly now. "You told me, Vanessa. You said the boy was coddled. You said he needed discipline. I thought it was just a scare. I didn't know." Her shoulders shook as her confession filled the room like smoke. I felt my stomach turn, my fingers trembling against the crumpled slip of paper. The proof had been here all along, not only in my hands, but in the conscience of a young girl broken by the weight of her complicity. All eyes turned to Derek. He stood motionless, his face drained, his lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. His eyes darted wildly first to me, then to Jordan, still crouched beneath the table, clutching his fire truck with white knuckles, and finally to Vanessa, whose mask was shattering before us all. "Derek," I said, my voice low but steady. "You've heard her. You've seen the pattern. The lunchbox, the cookie, the missing allergy form. Now this." Vanessa lunged forward, grabbing Derek's arm. "Don't listen to her. Don't listen to Gloria. They're lying, both of them. This is jealousy, that's all. They can't stand to see us happy." Her voice cracked, a strange blend of rage and desperation. The performance was unraveling, but Derek's body language betrayed him. He recoiled, pulling his arm free, his eyes wet with disbelief. He staggered back a step as though the floor beneath him had split. And still the murmurs grew. Some guests shook their heads in horror. Others whispered accusations. The earlier question that no one would kill a child at their own wedding now sounded like denial rather than logic. I looked at my son, the man I had raised, the father I had hoped he would become. The moral conflict blazed in his eyes. If he believed me, he would have to accept that the woman he married was willing to endanger his child. If he believed Vanessa, he would have to dismiss not only me, but the tears of her own cousin. This was the moment where silence could no longer shield him. "Derek," I said, my voice breaking, "look at your son." Slowly, his gaze lowered to the floor where Jordan crouched. The boy's wide eyes glistened with unshed tears, his small body trembling, the toy truck pressed to his chest like a talisman. He was too young to voice the fear that consumed him, but old enough to know the danger he faced. Derek's breath hitched. He raised a hand to his face, wiping at his eyes, then let it fall uselessly at his side. His voice cracked, barely audible. I don't know what to believe. The words splintered me. For all the evidence, for all the pain laid bare, he still teetered on the edge of denial. The hall waited, holding its breath. Would he side with truth or with the illusion he had clung to so tightly? My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a demand. Protect the boy. Protect the boy. I stared at him, my son, my flesh and blood, and I prayed silently that he would find the courage to see what was right in front of him. Because at that moment, the moral conflict was no longer mine alone. It belonged to him, and the entire room knew it. For a moment, the room held its breath. Gloria's sobs still echoed faintly, and Derek's broken words, "I don't know who to believe," hung like smoke no one could clear. The silence was unbearable, a tension strung so tight it could snap with the slightest touch. And then Vanessa snapped. Her voice tore through the ballroom, sharp and furious, but laced with a pain so raw it startled even me. Her voice broke into sobs. "Do you know what it feels like to live with a ghost? To hear her name in every room, to see her picture on the walls? I try Derek, I try so hard, but Monica's shadow is everywhere. And that boy, her boy, is a reminder that I will never be enough." The words stunned the room. Gasps rippled across the crowd like shockwaves. No longer was she the flawless bride. Her voice cracked, her eyes wild, her face twisted with resentment. Every guest now saw the truth. I had long suspected her jealousy was not just spite, but an obsession. I felt my throat tighten. I had known Vanessa's smile was too perfect, her gestures rehearsed, but I hadn't expected this eruption of bitterness. It was jealousy, sharpened into hatred, fear curdled into cruelty. Her voice shook, rising louder. "Do you know what it's like to live in someone else's shadow? To hear her name whispered in every room, to see her picture on the walls, to know that no matter what I do, I'll never be enough. Monica's memory haunts this family and that boy. Her boy reminds me every single day that I will never be chosen first." Her words seared through the air, brutal and unfiltered. And for the first time, I saw not just malice, but the fracture inside her. She wasn't only a villain. She was a woman consumed by insecurity, terrified of being invisible, desperate to matter, even if it meant destroying a child. But her confession was her undoing. The guests recoiled. Some covered their mouths, others shook their heads in disbelief. The grandeur of the ballroom shrank into something fragile and false. The chandeliers still glittered above, but their light now illuminated ugliness too raw to hide. And then Derek broke. He dropped to his knees beside the table, his hands reaching for Jordan. My grandson crawled into his arms, and Derek clutched him to his chest as if he could fuse them into one. His sobs were violent, unrestrained, tearing out of him in waves. His shoulders shook, his face pressed against Jordan's hair. My son Derek wept. "God, my boy, I'm so sorry." The sight of him crumbling, holding his trembling child, nearly broke me too. My knees weakened, my vision blurred. For so long I had begged Derek to see to open his eyes. Now he did, and it shattered him. The room was silent. No music, no chatter, no celebration, just the sound of Derek's grief, raw and human, echoing against marble walls. Vanessa staggered back, her eyes darting wildly across the hall. The mask she had worn for so long was gone, shattered into pieces no one could piece together again. All that remained was the truth, a woman undone by her own envy. "I only wanted to be seen," she whispered hoarsely, her voice so small it was almost lost. "I only wanted to matter." But no one comforted her. No one moved to her side. Guests turned away, their faces cold with condemnation or pity. She had exposed herself, and the weight of every eye pressed down like judgment. I looked at her then, and though anger still burned inside me, I also saw something else. The tragic outline of a woman who had mistaken destruction for love, who had chosen cruelty as a way to claim significance. She had built her world on the ruins of her fear, and now it had collapsed in front of everyone. Derek rocked Jordan gently, whispering apologies through his tears. The boy clung to him, still trembling, still silent, but alive. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. The vows Vanessa had spoken minutes earlier, promises of devotion, unity, and forever lay in ruins on the floor. The perfect image she had crafted dissolved, replaced by the truth everyone had witnessed with their own eyes. The wedding was no longer a wedding. It was an unveiling, a reckoning, a night no one in that hall would ever forget. And as I stood there, still clutching the wrinkled slip of paper in my hand, I felt the truth settle heavy in my bones. This battle was no longer just mine. Derek had finally seen. Jordan had been saved. And Vanessa, in her outburst, had condemned herself. The ballroom, once filled with laughter, was now filled with silence. The silence of judgment. The silence of betrayal laid bare. The silence of vows shattered beyond repair. Vanessa disappeared from our lives as suddenly as she had forced herself into them. One day she was the bride basking in the glow of a lavish wedding. The next she was gone. Her name whispered only in anger or shame. She left the house in silence, no goodbyes, no apologies. Only the sound of a door closing and the cold echo of vows shattered beyond repair. But her absence did not end the story. It only began the harder part, picking up the pieces. The community reacted in waves, each voice carrying its own judgment. At the grocery store, whispers followed me down the aisles. Some neighbors stopped me to press my hand and say, "Grace, you did the right thing. You saved that boy's life. You were brave to speak out." Their words warmed me, even if only briefly. Others, however, frowned, their voices sharp with disapproval. "Why make such a scene at the wedding? Couldn't you have handled it privately? You embarrassed your son in front of everyone." It stung, though I refused to let it break me. I knew what I had done was necessary. Still, the divide in the community was like a wound that refused to close. The story spread online, too. Guests shared their versions, some defending me, others painting me as the villain who destroyed a celebration. The debate grew louder. Justice or humiliation, courage or cruelty. And through it all, I kept Jordan close. Derek was a shadow of himself. The once confident man was now hollow, his shoulders bent under the weight of regret. He carried Jordan to school, walked him home, sat with him at the dinner table. But the laughter, the warmth, the natural ease of fatherhood seemed lost. Each night I saw him staring at Jordan as if searching for forgiveness in the child's eyes. His words came out in whispers. "I'm sorry, son. I should have protected you." But Jordan rarely answered. He was only 8 years old, and his silence was both shield and wound. Then came Lena. Lena had been with me for years, more like a granddaughter than a ward. She was 23, thoughtful and steady, with a quiet kindness that reminded me of Monica. When Vanessa left, Lena stepped in without hesitation. She came by every morning, kneeling to pack Jordan's lunch with deliberate care. On top of his sandwich and fruit, she tucked in a folded note for his teacher. "Peanut allergy, please watch closely." And in the corner, she sketched a silly cartoon face just to make him smile. The first time Jordan opened his lunchbox and found the note, he showed it to me with wide eyes. For the first time in months, I saw a flicker of something bright, trust, perhaps even joy. At home, Lena sat cross-legged on the rug-building towers of blocks, with him racing toy cars across the carpet. She knew how to make him laugh, how to coax words out of his silence. One evening, as the red fire truck clattered across the floor, Jordan burst into giggles, real unrestrained laughter. The sound filled the house like sunlight pouring through a window long shut. I stood in the doorway, my heart swelling. The red fire truck had been silent for too long. It had sat as a reminder of loss, of Monica's absence, of the weight Jordan carried. Now it was alive again, rolling across the floor as Lena and Jordan made siren noises together. And when Jordan's laughter rang out clear and strong, I knew healing had finally begun. Derek watched too. He stood by the kitchen counter, his arms crossed his face, pale with emotion. For a moment I thought he might leave the room. But then Jordan looked up, his cheeks flushed from laughter, and ran into his father's arms. Derek caught him, held him close, and for the first time in months, I saw a smile break through the cracks of his guilt. Later that night, I overheard the moment that would stay with me forever. Jordan sat on Derek's lap, his little hands fidgeting with the buttons of his father's shirt. His voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Daddy," he whispered, "I want Aunt Lena to stay." The words hit Derek like a blow and a blessing all at once. His eyes filled and his arms tightened around his son. He didn't answer right away. He just held Jordan as if that single sentence had given him both forgiveness and direction. I stepped away quietly, leaving them in that tender embrace. Some pieces could not be forced back together. They had to be chosen, reassembled with patience and love. That night, as I sat by the window with a cup of chamomile tea, I thought about the word family. It was not just blood. Family was who showed up, who protected, who loved without condition. Family was Monica's memory living in Jordan's laughter. Family was Lena writing silly notes and drawing cartoon faces. Family was Derek broken, but learning again how to be a father. And family was me standing guard, holding the line, keeping the promise I had made years ago when Jordan first asked, "Where is Mommy?" The world outside still judged, debated, argued over what had happened. Some said I was wrong to expose Vanessa so publicly. Others said I was a hero, but none of them lived in this house. None of them tucked Jordan into bed or heard him laugh again or felt the warmth of his small hand reaching out in trust. We were the ones left with the aftermath, and slowly, piece by piece, we were learning how to live again. The house was finally quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't press down like a burden, but settles gently, like a blanket laid across tired shoulders. I sat by the window in my favorite chair, the late afternoon light spilling across the room in soft amber streaks. Outside, the leaves swayed lazily in the breeze, their edges kissed by the gold of early evening. Behind me, Jordan slept soundly on the couch, his little body curled beneath a quilt. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, each breath a small reminder that he was here, alive, safe. Beside him, resting at arm's length, lay the red toy fire truck. Its paint was chipped, its wheels a little crooked, but to me it was a relic, proof of resilience, proof that laughter could return even after silence. I looked at him for a long time, my heart swelling with both gratitude and humility. I had nearly lost him, nearly lost the last living piece of Monica's love. That thought still froze my blood when it crept into my mind. But each time I looked at Jordan sleeping peacefully, I reminded myself that he was still here. We had survived the storm. I leaned back and closed my eyes, hearing my own words echo quietly inside me. Family is not blood alone. It is who stays, who protects, who loves. The world outside still debated, still gossiped. Some called me brave, others called me cruel. But none of those voices mattered now. What mattered was the boy sleeping in my living room, the bond we had built, the promise I had kept. Derek walked into the room quietly, careful not to wake his son. He stood by the doorway for a moment, watching Jordan with the same awe I had felt. His shoulders were straighter now, no longer bent beneath shame, though the lines of regret still lingered on his face. Slowly he turned his gaze toward Lena, who was tidying up the kitchen, her hair falling loose across her cheek as she bent to wipe the counter. There was something different in his eyes, something soft, searching, almost tentative. For the first time, I saw Derek looking at Lena, not just with gratitude, but with the recognition of possibility. Perhaps not love, not yet, but the chance to heal, to rebuild, to walk forward instead of circling endlessly in the ruins of the past. I said nothing. It wasn't my place to interfere. But in that moment, I allowed myself a breath of hope that my son might finally learn what it meant to be chosen and to choose well in return. As the last of the sunlight poured across the floorboards, I thought about Vanessa. She was gone, swallowed by her own choices, left to wander a life she had tried so desperately to control. I had no desire to chase her, to punish her further. The truth had already spoken louder than I ever could. That was enough. Retaliation would have diminished me. Silence, I realized, was its own kind of justice. I had no need to win. I only needed to protect. Jordan stirred slightly in his sleep, letting out a small sigh before settling deeper into the quilt. I brushed a hand across his hair and whispered softly, "You're safe now, sweetheart." My promise had been kept. Years of working as a librarian had taught me to find stories, to preserve them, to pass them along. But this story, our story, had been written, not in books, but in choices, in risks, in the fragile moments where silence or courage could change everything. It was a story I never asked to live yet, one I was grateful had not ended in tragedy. I lifted my gaze to the fading light and let myself breathe in the quiet. For the first time in months, peace did not feel foreign. It felt earned. The world might forget what had happened here. In time, gossip would die down, the whispers would fade, and life in Atlanta would continue with its ordinary rhythm. But in this house, in this family, nothing would ever be the same. We had walked through fire, and though we were scarred, we were not destroyed. I pressed my hand lightly over my heart, grounding myself in the present and let the truth settle inside me. I nearly lost him. But love, truth, and the quiet strength of those who refuse to stay silent saved us. Years from now, Jordan may not remember the wedding or the whispers, but he will remember the fire truck, the safety of my arms, and the lesson that silence never protects, but truth always will. As I sit here today, I think back to that moment when a small piece of paper nearly changed everything. A lunchbox, a wedding note, a choice to speak or to stay silent. It all came down to love and truth. This story is not just mine. It belongs to every parent, every grandparent, every person who has ever stood up when silence would have been easier. It reminds us that family is not about blood alone. It is about those who stay, who protect, who love without condition. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share your thoughts. Would you have spoken up even if it meant breaking the peace? Tell me where you are watching from, and let's build a community of people who believe in quiet strength and justice. And if you believe these stories matter, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support allows us to bring more real-life dramas that reveal betrayal, healing, and hope. Because in the end, love and truth will always be enough.